Hello, everyone. This is Source Codex, and it's time for another one of my funny memories and wild tales. This episode would be called Blowing Up Things in Science Class. Now, when I was a student in various science, chemistry classes in junior high school, and college, sadly, nobody ever blew anything up. Now, later on, after I graduated from college, I was approached and asked if I wanted to be a science teacher at a private school. Well, it was going to be a good deal more money than working at the local Kmart. So I thought, I've got a college degree. I couldn't find work. And now this guy is saying he'd like to hire me in a private school, which had some sort of prestige. But it wasn't really all that much money for the late 70s. It was like $175 a week. Yeah. That's what I said. $175 a week. But anyhow, I took the job because I figured, it's worth it, doing something that I would enjoy. And I liked the whole thing of teaching. I liked the fact that I'd be teaching science, and I liked science. I found it fascinating. I thought it was a lot of fun. So I went ahead and accepted the position. It required me to go back to college for about a semester and audit a bunch of classes to learn how to teach, public speaking, test design, various things along that line. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, maybe some geology. I can't remember exactly all the different courses I took, but that's not really what the story is all about. The story is about blowing up things in science class. Now, I wanted the kids to have the ability to learn something by having something unique happen, something memorable, something that they could look at, that they could experience. So my roommate, he was the science teacher in that class, in that capacity, the year before. And the grade levels were grade 7 through grade 12. The classes were relatively small. I had some classes, a chemistry class, which was like only 4 people in it. And, the one class I had that had about, 20, 25 kids in it, like I said, I talked to my roommate who was a science teacher last year, and I said, I want to do that experiment with putting pure sodium into a beaker of water and showing the violent reaction. He said, oh, okay, well, that stuff's stored in a can there in the lab in kerosene. So it doesn't react with any water that might be in the atmosphere. Well, I thought, okay, whatever. So I cut this little sliver, probably not much thicker than a dime and not much bigger than a dime, and I dropped it down into this huge beaker of about 5,000 milliliters of water, and I told the kids to watch. I had them stand back halfway from the lab bench. I had on a protective schmuck, so to speak, an apron, and I had my safety glasses. Well, it just laid there in the water and really didn't do much of anything. It was kind of disappointing. So I quickly got on the horn and called my roommate, who was a teacher of another subject in the school, and I said, look, the sodium is not doing a thing. It's pretty unsatisfactory. And he said, well, cut off a bigger piece and throw it in there. So I cut off a piece probably as big as a $50 coin, probably, I don't know, about a quarter of an inch thick. And I dropped it in there, and lo and behold, it started sputtering. And it started sort of spinning around in the water and moving around in the beaker. And I said, you see the violent reaction there? We're giving off hydrogen gas, H2, and the leftover there is a sodium hydroxide, a base in the water. That's what's being created. And I went about blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden, one of the kids said, hey, it's on fire. And I looked back, and sure enough, the sodium was aflame. It was burning on the top of the water. I'd never seen anything like it before, to see something in the water on fire. And I said, well, isn't that something? And then the next thing I knew, there was this huge explosion, a flash of light, glass went flying everywhere across the room, and the beaker basically fell apart, and the only thing that was left was half of a beaker. The whole front of the beaker blew across the whole room, and the not good to be touching corrosive basic solution, the sodium hydroxide, poured all over the bench and all down the cabinets and all over the floor. And I didn't know what to do, so I just took a bow, and the kids started clapping their hands, saying, wow, that was cool. And I said, now what happened here was we had all that hydrogen gas building up inside the top of the beaker, and the fire, the exothermic reaction, the heat, and the light, and all that good stuff, it ignited the hydrogen and exploded the beaker, which you have just seen. And then I asked a lot of the kids, is everybody okay? Because it was a huge explosion. And kids all the way across the room were picking pieces of glass off of their shirt and laying on the desk and the floor around them. And nobody got hurt. Nobody got any glass in them, and no base got on them. But it was, thank God, I had all the kids move away from the demonstration area. And about that time, one of the administrators of the school came flying in the door, and of course there's this pall of smoke floating around in the room, and he looks around and he says, is there a fire extinguisher in this room? And I said, no, sir. And he said, I got to make a note of that to get that. From then on out, I'm not kidding you, the whole rest of the school year, in all of my classes, because the word got around, when there was spare time at the end of a lesson, the kids were always asking me, hey, can we put some sodium in water? I was like, no, we're not going to do that. Now, in one of my upper level chemistry classes, I thought, let's see, in the same class of the periodic table, The more highly reactive metal below sodium, Na, is K, potassium. So I thought I would try that with potassium, but with a small group of kids, students. So I got some potassium. I had it I was wearing a glove. Oh, wait a minute. No, I wasn't. I had paper towels in my hand, and the sodium was laying in the paper towel. And it had rained that morning, so I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to go outside, take a little field trip, and I could throw this potassium into a puddle on the asphalt. Well, I was walking out there. It was a very, very kind of foggy day, foggy morning. And as I was walking out there to the puddles, one of the girls in the chemistry class said, your hand's on fire. And I looked down, and the air, the moisture in the air had reacted with the potassium and had set the paper towel on fire on my hand. I didn't even notice it. And I blurted out some expletive, which I won't repeat, but it was all along the lines of, oh, shinola. And I dropped the potassium block on the ground in a puddle and waved my hand around to make sure it wasn't burnt, and it wasn't. And the potassium fell into the puddle and began sputtering and exploding and throwing bits and pieces everywhere. And all the people in the class, the 3 guys and the 1 girl, they were like, wow, that is so cool. So, they didn't forget reactivity, and they didn't forget exothermic reactions, and it stuck with it. And of course, that story spread around too. And then because I kind of liked fire and blowing up things as a young science teacher, I started reading, and I read about white phosphorus. Well, it was stored away in an inert situation, a non-reactive situation, and I double-checked with the former science teacher where it was stored, and I got some, and I laid it out on a pair of asbestos gloves right on the top of the counter. Had all the students as far back as they could be from the area of the demonstration, because phosphorus is supposed to spontaneously ignite. And sure enough, it did. It started burning right there on the gloves. I was, calmly explaining, and phosphorus spontaneously ignited with the oxygen in the air, and here we have this fire. Well, what I didn't plan on was how to extinguish the fire. And I tried everything I could. I picked up one of the gloves and laid it on top of the other glove and, held it down tight, and I'd lift the glove up, and boom, the remaining phosphorus would reignite. Well, the room was filling up with smoke, and kids were coughing, and, of course, I went to the windows. My room was right in front of the school entrance on this L part, the L-shaped school, and when I open the windows, all this white smoke goes billowing out. And at the same time, all the main administrators, the principal, and the people in charge are deciding just to make a spontaneous reaction themselves and go to the school and see how things were proceeding. And other administrators from other schools were going to see how well our private school functioned. And here I am with white smoke pouring out of the window. One of the administrators stopped and looked in and said, "Is everything under control here?" And I said, yes, sir, we're having a good time, and we're really learning about exothermic reactions. And they were like, okay, well, proceed. So I got away with that one. Now, I also liked really showy chemical reactions, and I read where you could put sugar into sulfuric acid, or maybe it was hydrochloric. I can't really remember. But what you got was this black mass started growing up out of the beaker and flopping to the side and getting taller, and it was really disgusting looking. It reminded me of an episode from the old science fiction film, the Monolith Monsters or something, because these things just kept growing and growing. So there wasn't any explosion there, but it was still pretty darn impressive. You would think I'd learned my lesson after all of that. I really didn't. One day, on a Saturday, I got a call from one of the kids in my class, and they said, hey, is there any chance you could do that sodium stuff on a Saturday morning? Because some of the kids couldn't afford, or their parents couldn't afford private school, so they came in on Saturdays to be like little custodians and clean the school up. And while they were there, I said, sure, I can give you a demonstration again of the sodium. So we did it repeated times, putting sodium in water and covering it up with a container, and then it would blow the container away, and it was just a lot of fun. Being like I am and being like kids are, you always want more. How about a bigger piece? How about a bigger container? What we did is we had a milk carton about half full of water, and I put in a chunk of sodium, probably the size of a tennis ball, in there. And then I had a great big coffee can, and I very quickly and deftly put the coffee can over top of the milk container with the sodium in it, and we all hauled boogie and got as far away as we could. In a few seconds, there was a massive explosion. I mean, it was loud. And when we looked where the coffee can and the milk carton was, it wasn't there anymore. And I said, I can't believe that this reaction was so violent that it completely destroyed the coffee can. And we looked around, there was no shards, there were no remains, and we all just said, wow, isn't this something? And then for some reason, I decided to look up in the sky. And what do I see? A little tiny dot getting bigger and bigger, coming closer and closer. And as it fell towards the school building, I realized, oh my gosh, it's the coffee can. It had been shot up like a rocket, and it fell down and landed on top of the school building. And everybody there thought that was the most awesome thing they ever saw. Amazing. Okay, this is the last chapter of blowing things up in chemistry class. So these same guys, they tired of the blowing up sodium, and one of the guys says, hey, do you know how to make a pipe bomb? And I said, a pipe bomb. So they said, yeah, that would be really cool. So something in me was like, I don't know. I said, I'll get back to you. Maybe we'll do it next Saturday. Because I had nothing better to do than blow things up. So I talked to one of my other roommates, who was kind of I guess you would say, an explosives-oriented kind of guy. I actually knew a guy in college nicknamed Nubs, because one of his little bombs went off a little too early. Ergo, his fingers were nubs. But anyway, back to the school antics. I found a pipe. We mixed up all the ingredients for the explosives. We packed both ends really nice. I don't remember what we used to pack it into the pipe. And I decided, what's the hottest material that we can use as a fuse that'll burn right through the packing and right down into the explosive content? Aha, magnesium. We had a pipe bomb. It was packed and ready to go. Had a magnesium fuse. We dug a hole in the side of the hill near the soccer field and stuffed that pipe bomb down in there with nothing but the fuse sticking out. So, of course, there's always me, the one to light it. I think I used a handheld propane torch. I don't exactly remember how I got the magnesium lit, but I stood there long enough to see that it was on fire and burning. As before, I hauled Boogie, and we got far enough away. We had no idea what the explosive force of this 8 or 9 inch long by 1 inch wide pipe bomb was going to produce. And we waited. And we waited. And we waited. And one of the guys says to me, "So when's this thing supposed to go off? How long does this fuse have to burn?" I, of course, said, "I have no idea. I thought it would have blown up by now." One of the guys said, "Well, you need to go down there and check it. You're the teacher. You're the adult." I said, "I'm not going down there anywhere near that bomb." One of the older brothers said, "I'm not afraid. I'll go down there." And I yelled at him. I said, "Do not do that." Of course, he was bullheaded, and he jumped up and went running down the hillside to where the bomb was. Well, once I could see there was no stopping him, of course, being the kind of guy I was, as soon as he got right close to where the bomb was, I yelled out, "Boom!" like that. And he dove for cover like he was being shot. But there was no explosion. He actually dug it out, pulled the pipe out, and held it up, and we all went down there and looked at it, and I kept thinking, this is the stupidest thing. We've got no idea whether or not that fuse is still smoldering or something. But you know, it never went off. It never exploded. I don't understand it. Everything was done according to the way we were supposed to do it. And it's just like the hand of God came down and said, "Thou shalt not blow up this pipe." I picked it up, threw it in the garbage, and I said to these kids, "Not a word to anybody about today. Not a word to anybody about the other weekend when we shot that coffee can into outer space. This is all just between you guys and me. And consider this extra credit on your next test." So we all shook hands on it, and, well, that was the end of the story. And still, to the end of the year, all the kids, whenever there was free time towards the end of class, they would all ask me, "Hey, can we blow something up?"